I wanted to be a doctor as far back as I can remember, maybe from obsessively watching MASH reruns growing up. My parents are both scientists, who raised us to love the multiplication and periodic tables, and the majestic order of the natural sciences. So the prospect of biology, chemistry, and math courses never put me off. My passion for activism, service, and research was solidified there, followed by 4 years of medical school at the Michigan State University. My last 2 clinical years were in Flint. I became a pediatrician. A crying baby gives me a sense of mission. Deep inside, I have a powerful, almost primal drive to make them feel better, to help them thrive.
This is the story
This is the story.
This is the story.
of the most important environmental,
Public health disaster of this young century.
It is the story of a government poisoning its own citizens.
And then lying about it.
It is a story about what happens when the very people responsible for keeping us safe,
care more about money and power than they care about us.
And our children.
the crisis manifested itself in water.
And in the bodies of the most vulnerable among us.
Children who drank that water.
Cooked with that water.
Babies who guzzled bottles of formula mixed with that water.
But this is also a story about the deeper crisis we're facing right now in our country, a breakdown in democracy.
Environmental injustice that disproportionately affects the poor and black.
The abandonment of civic responsibility.
In our deep obligation as human beings to care and provide for one another.
It's about a bizarre disavowal of honesty, transparency, good government, and respect for scientific truth. Flint, Michigan was in a near bankruptcy state, really suffering from crisis for years, if not decades before this water crisis. In Michigan, if you're in financial dire straits, the state can come in and really usurp democracy.
So in 2011, Flint became under the control of state-appointed financial emergency management. And that emergency manager's job was austerity. It was to ostensibly save money no matter what the cost.
They decided that the water that we had been getting for half a century from the Great Lakes, fresh pre-treated like Huron water that we have been buying from Detroit, was too expensive.
On April 25, 2014, officials from Flint, Michigan switched the city's water supply to Flint River as a cost-cutting measure for the struggling city.
In doing so, they unwittingly introduced lead-poisoned water into homes in what would become a massive public health crisis.
Here's the Flint.
On a hot day in the summer of 2014 in the Civic Park neighborhood where Pastor R. Sherman McCatherine preached in Flint, Michigan, water rushed out of a couple of fire hydrants and splashed the skin of delighted kids who ran through it. But the spray looked strange. The water was coming out dark as coffee for hours, McCatherine remembered. The shock of it caught in his throat. Something is wrong here.
The water is fine.
The water is fine.
Miguel del Toral, who had worked in the Chicago office of the EPA, he had come to Flint a few months before, after being contacted directly by a resident who was concerned about her water.
Flint is not using corrosion control.
What is corrosion control?
Water is naturally corrosive. The water systems are supposed to treat the water to reduce corrosivity. In Flint, the service lines, the pipes that run from street into people's homes, are made of lead. The plumbing inside people's homes has lead too.
Wait a second. Are you saying
There's lead in Flint's water.
lead in the water?
Yes, and the lead levels in the Flint water are really, really high.
I knew I had to do something, even though no one at the state or county health department had done much to take action. I was a lifelong progressive and a believer in government, and I was quickly losing faith.
A sea of red tape lay between an official health advisory, which would free up resources and qualify the city for bottled water, filters, and other aid.
Is the official indifference because these are Flint kids, poor kids, black kids, kids who already have every adversity in the world piled against them?
I was getting really mad. At times, I could feel myself physically shaking. The mayor was finally ready to talk water.
We've just this morning had a meeting about this with the EPA and DEQ, and they've told us there's no corrosion issue.
Something inside me wilted.
Okay, maybe there is lead in the water, but it isn't the city's, the state's, or the Fed's responsibility or mine.
It's the people's fault. But there is lead in the blood of children living in Flint?
The prohibitive cost of switching back to Detroit water? Flint just can't afford that. Besides, isn't everybody in Flint already flushing their water?
Did anyone think Flint residents who were already paying the highest water rates in the country were going to waste water for 5 long minutes of flushing?
This is a crisis. This is an emergency. The water has to be switched back immediately.
That's impossible. There's absolutely no money for Flint to switch back to Detroit water. The pipeline to Detroit has already been sold.
If you wouldn't stand with me and make the announcement that there was lead in the blood of the kids of Flint, then we would do it without him.
When Governor Snyder's office heard that a pediatrician was calling a press conference about blood lead levels in Flint kids, they had an immediate, very strong reaction.
They went nuts.
Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha had been stalking and harassing the state health offices with concerns, inquiries, and warnings for weeks. Nobody cared.
Nobody gave a shit.
Now, suddenly, she was in trouble for not being in touch with Governor Snyder's directly?
Maybe it would be easier for everybody else if I just stayed a good little pediatric residency director and waited for the proper authorities to come to their senses. But that's not how I see things.
The world shouldn't be comprised of people in boxes, minding their own business. It should be full of people raising their voices, using their power and presence, standing up for what is right.
That's the world I live in and the world I want to live in. I wonder if part of the pushback was about the $270 million the state government approves for Michigan State University every year. The power of money can't be underestimated, ever. I walked out into the hallway to a small bathroom across from my office. I filled a bottle with Flint water. It looked okay, pretty clear, but that wasn't the point. The point was where our eyes couldn't see.
The Hurley conference room, just a few floors down, was ready by the time the doctor arrived.
There were 40 or 50 people there, mostly reporters, photographers, and TV camera crews. More people were coming through the door behind.
Deeper into the gathering crowd,
I caught sight of Leanne Walters, the tough Flint mom and military wife who started it all. Gone to town meetings, called at EPA. Her life much over the last year had been about the water and all the Flint kids.
People were still arriving, now about 100 in all. They were mostly hospital employees, a dozen or more activists, the tireless water warriors.
Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha looked out into the sea of cameras and microphones and began. She talked for about 40 minutes, which for her went by in an instant, but felt like a lifetime. She needed to open their eyes, to make them really see. At the end of her presentation, she held up a baby bottle filled with Flint water.
This is what our babies are drinking for the first year of life, lead-tinted water during the period of the most critical brain development. I paused. I held up the water bottle for a few seconds longer. I wanted everyone to really see it. It needed to sink in.
For a few minutes after she stepped from the podium, she was buzzing with a post-adrenaline high.
The stress of anticipation was behind me.
The press conference was over. The news was finally public, released from her cycling mind and heavy shoulders, and out in the world.
My family came to the United States basically as refugees, fleeing oppression, in search of a peaceful and prosperous place for my brother and me to grow up. The American dream worked for us. I realized that America has changed a lot since I was a little girl.
There really are two Americas.
The America I was lucky to grow up in.
And the other America, where a simple meal or clean water or a bath can require a fight.
Where is the American dream in this scenario?
Income and wealth inequality make mobility tough.
Stagnation is now the norm.
At the end of their lives, most children wind up where they started.
Not just Flint's kids, but children in Detroit and Los Angeles and Chicago and Baltimore and all over rural America.
Black, brown, and white. Too many kids are growing up in situations stacked with insurmountable toxic stresses and every barrier imaginable.
Too many kids are growing up in a nation that does not value their future or even try to offer them a better one.
As a doctor, what can I prescribe our son and daughters of the other America? The most important medication that I can prescribe is hope.
It's a lot about hope. It is definitely about a crisis. It's about resistance. It's about taking action and opening eyes. And it is about hope. It is about building a better tomorrow, not only for our children in Flint, but our children everywhere. And the hope that I prescribe is not just words. It is actions. It's evidence-based, science-based, resilience-building actions. And that's what we need to be doing for all of our children.